And joining us now, she's the host of Staff Graph podcast and writes for the Hockey News periodically, and also, of course, former Canucks analyst Rachel Doerrie joins us here on Sekeres and Price, featuring Jeff Patterson, who is in for Matt Sekeres. So alas, I'll have to wait to say hi to Matt, Rachel. But thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I got Jeff as a teammate now at the Hockey News. It's quite fun.
That's
We
right.
have a blast.
I understand it. It looks like a fun portal for everybody. We look forward to a full season of it next year. It's going to be a lot of fun. And who knows what the Canucks will give up for Jeff to write about in the coming year. What do you think of the past fortnight? Well, let's start with the draft. It was. I think everybody thought fine. Rachel, what was your synopsis of it?
Yeah, I think honestly, like the Canucks can't be more entertaining than they were last year. Like maybe it would be good if they were less entertaining for everybody's sake, including like yours. But honestly, like the draft, I think Tom Willander is going to be a fantastic top four right-handed defenseman, and those are really hard to find. Having said that, I think it's hard to ignore the talent that they left on the board, specifically with Zach Benson. But honestly, like I don't think the Willander pick was a bad pick at all. He wasn't my top-rated defenseman in the draft. I had him like a couple spots lower, so it wasn't even that much of a reach for me. It was that Benson fell and was right there sitting, waiting to be picked, and he was somebody that everybody had rated really highly. So did I. So I don't think that it was disappointing per se from like a first round perspective. The rest of it, I would say that there was a lot to be desired. But then again, like you have to trust in your development. And if the Canucks do that, and they should, given who's in their development department, you just never know. I think if they get two NHL players from this draft, that should be considered.
They'll be inextricably linked, though, won't they, going forward in their careers? Like the comparisons will always be there between Willander and Benson for Canuck fans, right?
Well, yeah, I think so. One, Benson's a Vancouver kid, right? So that's hard to ignore that side of it. The other thing is like everyone talks about size, and I went back and I looked. In the last 10 years, I looked at every single Conn Smythe Trophy winner. And Crosby's won it twice, so there's technically only 9 winners, right? 5 of them are under 6 feet. 2 of them are 6 foot, or 3 of them are 6'1", and only 2 of them are over 6'1". So you don't have to be big to have an impact in the playoffs, clearly, because more than half the time somebody sub 6 feet is winning it. And so I don't think that's a good enough justification, but getting a right-handed defenseman is super valuable. So I can't really fault them for that. The problem is you also need a center, and a good one. And Zach Benson's that. And I would take his skill set over Willander's.
What do you make of what they did then July 1st? Obviously, they had needs. They went and they identified and addressed some of them in Carson Soucy, Ian Cole, and Teddy Bluger.
Yeah, I loved the Teddy Bluger signing, honestly. I thought that was one of the best signings of the day. I think that's a great bet. I have my rule, like don't make me tap the sign of don't give role players term or money. I would have been comfortable going 2 years with Teddy Bluger. He is somebody that is going to drastically improve their penalty kill. I think that he's good in the face-offs. He wins his puck battles. He's in the shot lanes. His stick's always in the right place. I really like that signing. I think he'll be a good bottom 6 player for them. Maybe take some of the pressure off of Nils Aman. The Ian Cole signing was a little bit too much money for me, but again, that's a penalty killer. He brings some snarl. He was kind of the odd man out last year in Tampa Bay. Like he really only played when there was an injury. But he should be sort of like a stable top 6 guy for Vancouver. And they've needed that. I mean, if you look at the last couple of years, it's been not fantastic. And so I think that's fine. The Carson Soucy deal, I mean, that's term and money. That's not a term I would have gone to because that's a 6th defenseman. And whether or not the Canucks see him as a top 4 defenseman or not, the reality is he was Seattle's 6th D, and he hasn't proven he can play top 4 minutes yet. If he can play top 4 minutes, that's going to be an absolutely fantastic deal. But if he can't, we're talking about another boat anchor, and that's what they should be trying to alleviate. I will say, though, Jeff, it was nice to see that they didn't go out and spend millions of dollars on long-term contracts that are going to impact the future of this franchise 5 years from now. So I thought that was a positive.
Yeah, smaller boat anchors.
Just back to Blueger for a sec. I mean, in a perfect world, you'd like a little more offense, I think, from a third-line center. Patrick Elvine on July 1st believes that there's more to give there. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, you talk about some of the reasons they brought him in, penalty kill and face-offs, and those are all ways that he can help the Vancouver Canucks. But what about offensively? And what about their center depth? I mean, you've got Pettersson and Miller, and then it feels like such a gap there to Blueger and Amon.
Yeah, so, I mean, you could have addressed that through the draft, the center depth, but again, chose not to. I don't think there's a ton of offense to Teddy Blueger's game. I think 30 points is probably the ceiling there. And in today's day and age, you kind of need a third-line center that can produce offensively, but is also a capable shutdown center. Like you look at JT Comfort, right? That's like, look at the third line center role he played when Colorado won the Stanley Cup. That's what a third line center is, right? You're providing offense, but you're also really dependable. I think ideally on a cup contending team, Teddy Blueger is your fourth line center, right? Teddy Blueger is the Nicolas Waugh of the Vancouver Canucks kind of thing, if they're contending. And right now he's going to be asked to play third line center, which is, that could be a little bit much for him. In terms of center depth, I think Elias Pettersson is going to be in the conversation for the Selke next year. I thought he should have been in the conversation this year. He is one of the top centers in the game and is probably going to be paid like it. JT Miller will be a center for maybe 2 more years. And I think eventually he's going to have to move to the wing. So that center depth is worse than it looks. We already saw Miller playing on the wing last year. And so I think that's an area that needs to be addressed. Perhaps can they pry a Michael Backlander and Elias Lindholm out of Calgary? Can they look for something on the trade market, things of that nature? Because I think that's an area, especially that second center role, that needs some serious addressing.
I mean, we were tossing this around already. Do they have one last big deal left in them this summer? Like, are you thinking any of these deals happens potentially this summer? Do they see the urgency the same way that a lot of us do?
I'm going to say no. I don't think they see that urgency. I think we are going to get another trade. I think Tyler Myers is going to get dealt. Now that bonus has been paid, I think that he has value around the league now that he is just sort of a $1 million salary guy. I know.
Well,
that...
we'll stop you there. We'll stop you there because conventional wisdom is that's a September bonus. That bonus hasn't been paid yet. Do you have any different information?
I believe that bonus was paid this week.
Really?
Yes, I believe that bonus was paid this week. So, I mean, regardless of, I think it was paid this week based on the information I have. If it hasn't been paid, the Canucks can opt to pay it early so they can facilitate a trade. That is an option that's available to them. If it's paid in September, which I don't believe it is at all, they can still trade him before the season starts. There are teams that are going to need help on the right side. And if the Canucks are willing to retain salary, let's say they're willing to retain 50%. Tyler Myers at $2.5 or $3 million is a much more palpable sort of contract to take than the full brunt of it. And because he is big and because of the whole size nonsense in the league, he is going to have value. And that's something where I think that the Canucks could extract a legitimate, fairly marketable player from that deal. And that's something I think that they should look to do given what they had to do with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I think that they should look to get something from the Tyler Myers deal. I thought that they should have re-signed Ethan Bear regardless of the injury. I kind of still think, I hope that happens because I thought he fit in really well in Vancouver, whether it was under Boudreau or under Tocchet. I thought that he looked a little bit better. And so kind of that increased opportunity, I think it will be a good spot for him.
Looking at the big picture, obviously now that July 1st is out of the way, the attention turns to Elias Pettersson and trying to get him locked up long-term. And J.P. Barry was on local airwaves here this week saying, no real plans to meet face-to-face with the Canucks until later in the summer. How much of it from the Pettersson camp do you think is tied to Austin Matthews, Sebastian Aho, nobody wanting to jump and try and set the market?
I think that that management group needn't be concerned about what's happening outside of their own four walls, in the most respectful way possible. Like, get your own house in order first and then worry about other people's houses. I think setting the market is something that is going to happen regardless, right? You're looking at it. Nathan McKinnon's contract is already signed. Obviously, Leon Draisaitl is going to be up next summer for one. There are different ways. I don't think you can even count Carolina in it because they have a different way of going about things. Carolina refuses categorically to overpay for anybody. I mean, they let Dougie Hamilton walk. And so I wouldn't even use anything Carolina does as a comparison because they just do things differently. Frankly, they do it so much smarter than 90% of teams in the National Hockey League. But I think the Austin Matthews comparison is a fair one. That is something where obviously I think Pettersson should get a little bit less than Austin Matthews, but I think he should be in the same ballpark. To me, Elias Pettersson is one of the most underrated players in the league. He is at minimum a $10 million center, if not better. I think that there's a scenario where he is like a top 7, top 8 center in this league for the next 8 or 9 years. And that's something where you're going to have to pay for that. And the Canucks may or may not have to overpay, but I do think that there's some hesitancy on both sides. J.P. Barry wants to get the most for his client, and the Canucks are leery because they've already been caught overpaying for other players. And the reality is if you're going to pay more than you should for a player, it should be an Elias Pettersson or a Quinn Hughes or a Thatcher Demko, and it shouldn't be any number of other contracts that have been signed recently.
What do you make? You alluded a couple of answers back to the size thing in the NHL. What do you make of this? Because Matt and I got into it. I think it risks slowing the league down a little bit. Although, as he points, it's just a different way to get from A to B because your reach and your length can help you get from A to B, even if you're not as fast a skater as the guy beside you. But is it going to have a tangible effect on the fans' enjoyment of the game? What's this size revolution going to mean to the National Hockey League, do you think?
You're talking about getting smaller?
Well, getting bigger. I think this past summer, in the draft and free agency, teams targeted bigger players.
Well, the Vegas effect, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. A copycat league as per usual. I wonder if the league slows down a little bit.
Yeah, when has the copycat thing ever worked? Everyone tried to copy the 2011 Boston Bruins, and that went famously well. Then
in a similar way.
Yeah, and then everyone tried to copy the Blackhawks, and that also went famously well because you didn't have Patrick Kane. So, I never understood this copycat thing because you, once again, need to focus on what's going on in your own house. And so, I think that there were mistakes made at the draft based on size. Yes, absolutely. I do think that there's something to be said for mobile players. But what we saw in the playoffs was that until the rule book is actually applied correctly, bigger players will have an advantage because they can just get away with bloody murder and nothing is going to happen. Now, if somebody looked me in the face and said, I think you can't win with Cale Makar because he's 5'11", but you can win with Tyler Myers, I would straight up laugh.
Yes,
do I think you can win with Tyler Myers? Yes, I think you can. A third pair D role. If Tyler Myers is your top right-handed defenseman, you have a major problem. And so I think size has to be married with skating, with puck-moving ability. That is the most important skill in the game for defensemen today is puck-moving ability. I don't care if you're a behemoth. If you cannot make an adequate breakout pass, you are completely useless to me because forecheckers are too fast. Skilled players are too agile. They could dart in and out of lanes. They're going to recognize things like that. So I do think it will slow the game down as it pertains to the playoffs because we're going to see more of that grabbing and clutching. But in the regular season, I think some of these players are going to get exposed, because if you are not a good enough skater, guys like McDavid and Matthews and Aho and Rupa Hintz, even Jason Robertson, Connor Bedard, they're going to run circles around you, and the penalties will get called in the regular season. So you kind of have to find this delicate balance of, are we willing to take the issues in the regular season, knowing that they may not be issues in the playoffs?
We could have players that are deemed to have poor regular seasons end up being the heroes in the playoffs just because they couldn't handle the speed of the regular season. But in the playoffs, when it gets mucky, they're able to perform. So maybe that is the trend. Maybe you keep the big guys in your back pocket until the playoffs, and then you trot them out.
What does that say about the state of the league? Seriously, where we're talking about building one team for the regular season and one team for the playoffs. You don't do that in baseball. You certainly don't do that in soccer, football. You don't do it in basketball. Like, what are we doing? That is so silly.
It may be under the guise of load management, but the rule book is different. I mean, no other sport has as different a rule book as hockey does, right?
No, it's crazy. I mean, if somebody said to me in my role kind of data wise today, we have to build one team for our regular season, but then we have to build. We have to play different players when we're in the Champions League, I would look at them and be like, how about you just play the Champions League players in the regular season too? Because theoretically, they're supposed to be better, and if they're not, we need to have a serious discussion about why. And so that's something where I think the league needs to probably take a look in the mirror, which we know is not going to happen.
No.
So you kind of, it's finding those unicorns, the Matthew Tkachuks, the Brady Tkachuks, the Tyler Bertuzzi's, players like that who can be good when the going gets tough.
Although Matthew Tkachuk even had trouble putting up points at times during the playoffs, of course. So
he was a menace, though. So
he was, he was indeed his usual self. Thanks for stopping by, Rachel. Always a pleasure chatting with you. Hope you have a great summer, and we'll touch base in the fall, perhaps.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the Whitecaps, Blake.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Can you send a German striker their way, please?
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Tackle all the hills with ease and don't arrive at work all sweaty. Get around the city on electric transportation that fits your lifestyle and get it at bestbuy.ca.